Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Purposes, we do ask that all present please speak directly into a microphone when presenting. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters.
Here.
Argia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. Our next item is revisions to our agenda of today, and in talking with Mr. Slaughter, I understand there is going to be one revision to the agenda as distributed.
Correct. Good evening, Commissioners. We are going to ask that the application for Mr. Roland Vaca be brought back at a later time, and also we will be bringing back at a later time the policy update. Everything else will stay the same.
So under item number 1 on land bank business, the first application will be deferred until a later time, and the policy update will also be deferred until a later time.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next item of business is to approve the Standing Committee minutes from our meeting of February 4th, 2019.
Good for approval.
There's a motion and a second to approve those minutes as submitted. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted, which then does take us to our committee agenda, and the first item is land bank business. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Slaughter.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll get started. First, we have a donation request of 3431 Barnett, and that is, as you can see here, outlined in black. That is the property request. Some information on the request. The owners currently live out of state. Property currently has a demo lien of over $18,000, and the 2018 taxes are still owed. Owners claim property was demoed without being notified. I did reach out to the demo department, and they have indicated that there was proper notification sent to them. There was some return address envelopes, or the card that comes with that were returned back to the department. So they feel that proper notification was submitted. And that was the point I was about to make. So that's the request for that property. And I'll turn it over for questions.
Well, Mr. Slaughter, when I looked at this item, I did have a concern, because as I look back at the payment history on this, it appears that the annual taxes and even a special from 2016, I assume that's for an abatement for weeds and grass, at least when I look at the picture we have attached to this property in Landsweb, which does show a structure, shows a structure with 4-foot tall weeds all around it at the time of the photo. But I mean, it appears that all these taxes and all these fees were paid in full on time every year. And yet they say they didn't receive notice of a pending demolition.
Correct.
Guess I'm going to get, this is not in my district, but I'm going to get the opinion of my fellow commissioners on this, because my first inclination is that they're trying to donate this to us to absolve themselves of a lien for demolition. I don't know. My first inclination is to say I'm not going to allow that that donation to the land bank just in the name of absolving that lien. Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. We might ask legal what ramifications would come about should we accept it and they go ahead and decide to take action against the unified government for their claim that they weren't properly notified.
Well, I think it would be unusual to deed it over and then make that claim, but I suppose they could take that track. I mean, I guess those are two separate claims, and so I don't really have the underlying information about that. But I mean, theoretically, we could be liable for the cost of the structure, but without knowing any information about that, I don't want to say that there's any validity to that claim, because that's just apparently his allegation.
If we were to accept the property, but still pursue compensation for the cost of the demo, is that something we could do, to take the property into the land bank, but still ask the owner to pay the demolition lien?
I'm not sure. Chris, does that get wiped out? No, the demo lien does not.
We would have to make that request, but that's generally standard practice, is that we would request that to be abated.
You know, I think where I'm coming from right now is that I would like this to be investigated, because I have no problem taking this property into the land bank, but I do have a problem discharging an $18,000 lien for something that we say the owner was aware of and could have taken steps to mitigate or prevent in that year or all of the years prior to it, and based on what I can see here, did not do that. So I guess I would move that we hold this over until next month with a request for more information in terms of splitting apart, taking the property from discharging the lien. Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. And just for clarification, I'd like to know if we send these back so it's clear. If we took this property in, the lien would not automatically be absolved unless you came to us and asked us to do that. Is that correct?
Well, there's procedural guidelines that we follow, so we would send a request to the Treasury to have that abated. The only issue of not abating it, and if they decide they don't want to pay and we do accept the property, I don't know if I'll ever get anybody to pay me $18,000 for that property if they wanted to, say, build on it or something like that. So
right.
we would run that risk of holding that property for a long time.
Right. Is there, and this is a question for legal, I know we've talked about and actually enacted several administrative procedures. So the question that I have is, would this situation concerning the lien fall under that one of the administrative procedures that we've just enacted? If we held the property, is there an administrative procedure through which the parties could go through and get a ruling, so to speak? One says they didn't receive notice, the other says we gave proper notice.
Right. I just find it unusual that they would say they didn't have notice, but they're going to give up the property. It seems like, I think until we investigate the facts, I'd hesitate to give any final answer until I think we just need to investigate and figure out what happened here.
Oh, yes, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot for an answer now. I'm saying as part of that investigative process, that's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Second.
All right.
Commissioner, just for clarification,
Absolutely.
One of the questions when I reach out to them would be is if we accepted it, would they still pay the lien? That's something that you would like to see answered?
What I'd like to see is if we accept it, you will still be responsible, and that's what I'd like us to do, is split apart accepting this land from discharging that lien. I mean, by their record, they appear to have paid in full and on time every year. They evidently got the bill every year and paid it. And all of a sudden, they didn't get a notice of a pending demolition, and they apparently, and again, I'm inferring all of this from the record, apparently took no action to forestall that.
I will add that when I did talk with Demo, they said the lien or the demo took place in April of last year. So this could have been the first tax bill they got with that lien on it, and that may have sparred why they turned around and put the request in. So I'll ask him those questions.
I'm going to just throw a wild guess out there, yes. So we have a motion and a second to send this back for further investigation of the circumstances of the demolition and the lien and the possibility of splitting apart the accepting of the land, but not discharging that lien, but instead pursuing collection of it. All right. Any further, yes, ma'am.
What other administrative procedures might apply in this circumstance
Excellent.
to resolve those very questions that you're talking about?
Any further discussion on this item? Any comment on this item? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters.
Aye.
Argia. Aye. Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McTiernan.
Aye.
Okay, last November, we put a hold on the Northeast land bank properties, and we asked for 180 days, and we're pretty much at that point now. So want to give you an update on where we're at with this. So again, the request was 180 days. This is just kind of some recap. Those were for the yard extension and property acquisitions. We did send, and we still are sending anybody that has applied for property in that area a letter stating that it is currently on hold. We also did state that if we did receive any applications for any kind of development or infill housing, we would work those up and present those as we usually do. And then we would come back, and that's where we are today. So a couple teams we want to mention that have been formed since we started this. The first one is the Land Bank Staff Advisory Team and the Land Asset Management Team. And I think we've presented those, or at least mentioned those in other meetings up to this point. These are two teams that primarily the focus is what do we do in certain situations when it comes to land, whether it's accepting or dispositioning them. The Staff Advisory Team was formed to kind of help me with some guidance, some advising roles on some of the policy changes that we're working on. It's been very productive that we've met, and we've met probably 3 or 4 times, or maybe I say 4 or 5 times in that time. So we still have the advisory board. Their role is still the same. So progress is being made. Some of the things we are working on is taking more of a strategic approach to certain neighborhoods. We've done some reports on the concentration of where land bank property is in relation to other vacant lots in a block, other tax sale eligible, and then what do we do if we can control large chunks of areas, whole blocks, that type of stuff. Those are the strategies we're still working on. So, but we're not done, and we're still working. We're close, but we feel that we need an extension. And so tonight, I think the action we're just going to ask for would be a 90-day extension, and then hopefully we'll come back with those strategies, with an updated land bank policy that will reflect those strategies. And we will send any application that we've sent a letter for, or that we've received, we will send a follow-up letter. And then during this 90-day thing, we will still, any new applications, they will get a notification that it is still ongoing for at least the time being a 90-day thing. So that's the small presentation for tonight. And again, our ask would be for a 90-day extension.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Slaughter? Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. What about a 120-day extension versus a 90-day? We'll be getting right into the peak of summer when a lot of construction and rehab and people will be wanting to move forward. About 120 day. I don't want to go the whole 180. Maybe split the difference with 190. Is this 90 days starting 1st of this month?
Correct.
Okay. I would, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to make it a 120-day extension.
Second.
Commissioner Townsend?
Well, I was going to do the same thing. So third, Mr. Slaughter has been keeping me apprised of the progress being made. So for all the reasons that we had talked about when we first approved this hold, and with the establishment of the advisory team, I would certainly want to see this continued if it's felt that it's still necessary. So I would support that.
So there's been a motion and a second to extend the hold area for 120 days, at which time we'd get an update. Yep. Any further discussion? Any comment on this item? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Regia. Aye. Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McTiernan.
Aye.
Okay, now it's time for our monthly rehab program update.
Look at that.
We continue to add contractors. We're at 118. Number of houses in the program has gone down. That's a good thing, but it's also an indication of the lower numbers in the tax sales that we're getting. Houses with no offers, we're sitting right around the mid-20s. 26, thank you.
Let's see.
But with all the new contractors that are coming on board, we're getting, I think I have 8 of these houses that I'll be opening up for potential offers. So we hopefully will have that number keep dropping. Demos completed, we're up to 30. No new change from last month. And we are sitting at 10 that are still in the demo process. Rehab started, we are now up to 43. And the amount of closing has dropped significantly down to 9. And our completed rehabs are now up to 29, so that's 3 from last month. And we've had the one eviction. I believe there's another filing, so we're just working through the details on that. We did have an open house on it, and I think if we do finally get this resolved, we will have a strong offer. We should have multiple strong offers on it. So now let's talk about the 3 new houses that have been completed. The first one is 3028 Cisna. Obviously not in it's in better shape than some of the ones we've gotten in the past. Just some pictures of the before. And this is a picture of the front of the recently completed. A little bit of the back area. It's very high off the street, so they did some concrete work and they have a little bit left to do there in the back, so there'll probably be some alley parking in there. Shot of the living room there, and just a couple other bedroom, kitchen. They have a stackable washer and dryer. It's in the room that leads down to the basement. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and some updates on the basement as well. So we required this from tax sale 339. The bid at the time was just a little bit under $900. Took the rehabber 11 months. January 1, it was appraised a little bit over $10,000, and it's currently being rented for $800 a month. Next house is 2119 North 7th Street, just up the street. This is a duplex. So again, it wasn't in bad condition. Some wear and tear, a little bit. And this is the kitchen from the second unit. And this is what the rehab has got it to now. So as you can see, this is the first floor. There's the bathroom, kitchen, one of the bedrooms. There is the second kitchen and some of the upstairs rooms, and then some modifications down in the basement. So this was a donated property. We didn't get this from the tax sale. It took the rehabber 7 months. January this year was appraised at $12,670, and each unit is currently being rented for $630. And the last one.
Chris, on these appraisals, this was while the property was under construction, I take it?
Correct. We'll wait until the 2020s come out to see what kind of impact that they have. And the last one tonight is 2050 South 10th Street. And some inside pictures. And the finished front. And there's part of the kitchen, bath. Stairs go upstairs. That bathroom there was a half bath that was added on during the rehab. Upstairs bathroom. And again, some more of the upstairs and another bedroom. And updates down to the mechanical area. So we got this in tax sale 338. The bid at the time was over $16,000. It took the rehabber 12 months. Jeremy one was appraised at $25,000, and it's currently listed for sale for $140,000. But sometimes we mention the ripple effect of these rehabs. So this is the house to the south that had some rehab work done because of the rehab at our house. This is the house to the north. They have a brand new roof put on it, and they're actually doing some interior rehabs going on by another contractor. And this is the house across the street that's had some work done. So again, another positive effect of the rehab program is nobody wants to be that ugly house on the block. And finally, just wanted to mention that it was brought to our attention that a property that is currently in the land bank needed some TLC. So this is at 1201 Metropolitan Avenue, and a lot of the damage was right there. We believe a car kind of, for whatever reason, was going a little bit fast across the little driveway there, hit that. As you can see, they kind of bounced off the edge of the building here. So we had a contractor go out and look at it, and we were kind of like, you know, it's probably had better days and stuff, so let's see what we can do. So we asked them to do some painting and some repair work. The bars over the window were all rusted. We asked them to kind of put some fresh coat of paint on it. So here's a picture of the updated remodel. Shouldn't say remodel, just the repairs. As you can see, they did repair the area that was damaged by the car, and just some exterior shots of the paint and the repairs that they did. So, so just we were happy to help out. The contractors that did this for us, they did an excellent job, and they're kind of one of our best contractors we had. So when we talked, they were really excited to do it. I think some of the weather we had there in late February kind of threw them back a little bit, but just wanted to give an update on that. So that's all I have tonight.
Excellent. Commissioner Townsend?
Great, great, great. The house on 7th Street, is that up for rent or is it rented already?
It's currently rented. Both units are rented.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I just want to say thanks a lot for the little gas station repair. I really appreciate it. The neighborhood in that area uses that as a tool shed sharing facility, since it's just a little box. And it also is sort of a landmark when you come into East Argentine there.
Well, we're glad to help. I will say, when we went out and looked at it, you can kind of see just a little bit in the window, and we thought, God, is there somebody in there? So we kind of jumped up, and it was like a mannequin with a wig on and stuff. So kind of freaked us out a little bit.
That's from our Halloween thing.
You know,
Stay out of our shed, Chris.
Yeah. So I think all that stuff is still intact on the inside.
I think you bring up a really interesting and important point here, because, I mean, this little bit of investment makes a huge difference in a neighborhood, and it really does lift up the neighborhood, because that's a very busy corner. Even though I don't necessarily live anywhere near it, I am by that corner very frequently as I'm back and forth to various places. And just having that and seeing it after it was fixed up a little bit, it makes an enormous difference in terms of just community pride and feeling good about the neighborhood. And I look forward to more renovations of more houses like that. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
That is the last item on our agenda. There are no further items for this committee. This meeting is adjourned. We'll give BPU Board Member Bryant just a moment to make it up here to the table, and then we will convene Economic Development and Finance.
It's that cul-de-sac.
Where?
On 10, really nice job. South of Douglas.
It's not like TAM's in school.
That's where it is.
That kind of sheltered street that goes north of TAM's.
Mm-hmm.
Development and Finance Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into the microphone. Would the clerk please call roll?
Roll call. Bryant?
Here.
Walters?
Here.
Murgia?
Here.
Townsend?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here?
Burrows.
Here. Next, I'll entertain a motion for approval of our February 4th minutes.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, minutes have been approved. Okay, on the committee agenda this evening, first of all, do we have any revisions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none. First item up this evening is the fourth quarter budget actual reports. So Kathleen Von Etchen, our CFO, is here. So Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you. So this is the report that we provide on a quarterly basis, and this happens to be the year-end report. So these reports are provided on a cash basis, and the final fund financial statements that are based on a modified accrual basis are going to be available at next month's meeting. All right. And so I'll get to that in a moment. So the first slide shows that the consolidated general fund ended the fiscal year with a total fund balance of $26,804,000, and which is very close to how much it started the year, $26,925,000. The net difference is a negative $121,000. That's the difference between the total revenues collected of 209,000, less total expenditures of 205 million, and then a net of allocation and transfers, which is an expense of 3.9 million. So as you know, the revenues minus expenditures and then minus that number is where you get the 121. All right. So we had often talked about we had a discussion previously about, in our general fund reserve policy, that if there is excess funds at the end of the year, meaning we collected more revenue than expenditures, then we could all have a discussion to redirect the available or the difference, the positive net margin, towards 5 different categories, from a decision-making standpoint. And I'm going to talk about that later on here in the presentation, okay? But in this situation, we basically balanced the budget less about $121,000. So there aren't any excess reserves if you're looking at this from a cash basis, okay? But once we complete the fund financial statements, which I mentioned I'm going to be providing next month, that's when we would be looking at possibly seeing if there was a positive net margin, and that's where that decision takes place. Now, I had previously indicated in the last month's meeting that we were going to have that discussion tonight, but then when I looked at the policy, I was reminded that actually it's based on a CAFR or financial statement basis, not on cash basis. So what I'm proposing tonight, and you'll see that in some of the later slides, is that we postpone that conversation so that we can present to you how the general fund is looking, and not only the general fund, but the other special revenue funds as well, how all those funds are looking on a modified accrual basis, okay?
Commissioners, any questions? Being none, Kathleen?
Just to compare this figure with the budget, you can see that the revenues are approximately roughly $3 million below what we estimated for the budget. And as we go through the detail, you'll see that most of that $3 million short or difference is a result of less sales tax than what was anticipated. The expenditures were budgeted at $213 million, and they came in at $205 million. All right, so that's roughly, yeah, $8 million difference. So the transfers here are substantially more than what were budgeted. And that's because in the final months of the fiscal year, or towards the end, I don't know, following the budget year, we came to realize that the fire station, as well as the project for the juvenile center, were both coming in with bids in excess of what we had budgeted. And so that additional amount that we needed to find, the commission directed us to go back into the operating budgets and find where there were savings, basically in these lines, and then move that savings out of the general fund to the capital project fund. It was roughly $1 million for the fire station and another $1 million for the juvenile center. So that explains the higher allocation. In addition, there were various capital projects that had not completed, but they were in mid-completion, that were cash funded, and we decided to move that available funds over to the capital project fund so that those cash projects could be completed in 19. So that's the difference there. Okay, so this is the overview of all the consolidated general fund, which includes the city, the county, and the parks funds. So just some highlights. I think I already mentioned that. So the actual revenues were so this is broken up by, here's how it compares to budget, and then the impact on the fund balance. The actual revenues, as I mentioned, were about $3 million below the budgeted estimate, primarily in sales tax receipts, which were lower in the latter half of the year. Actual expenditures were $7.6 million below budget, but primarily due to lower expenses in the services and grants and capital outlay, which Reggie will talk about. And then again, I spoke about that there were higher transfers out to the capital project fund because we had shifted operating savings from the operating lines to the transfer line so that the funds could go to the capital project. So, did want to point out that even on a cash basis, the consolidated general fund is estimated to be 21% of total expenditures, based on available data, and which, you know, our target is 17%. So,
Kathleen, just for the public that is watching, the 7.6 million of that was a 3.9 million that you took out of those additional funds, and then you put the you shifted 2 million of that 3.9 into the two projects, the Juvenile Justice Center and the fire station, at $1 million each.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the 121,000 that the ending to balance out the budget. I'm just trying to do quick math, and I come up with 1.6 million still available.
Well, so this is compared to budget. These are all the differences between budget. But when you, so are you, I'm not sure of your question.
Well, I'm not so sure my math is absolutely correct. That's why I wanted to revisit those numbers. Actual expenditures were 7.6 million below the budget, but of that 7.6, you moved 3.9 of that.
Well, 3.6, yeah. But the budget was 300,000, so 3.3 is the difference between the transfer out and the net transfer out and how much we actually transferred out. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll save my questions till we get,
This is a comparison of the budget, so and it's not meant necessarily to, add up net to the 129. So the negative 129 is directly a relation of 209.4 minus 205.5 minus 3.9. And that's what that number is. That's actuals, yeah.
Mr. Bryan.
I think what he's trying to say is, of the 3.9 that was transferred, so we've accounted for 2 million of it between the Justice Center and the fire station. What was the excess 1.6?
Yeah, those were other projects that had not been completed that were cash funded. We moved those funds over to the capital project fund, and Reggie's going to talk about those in his, yeah. Is that what you meant?
That's
all right.
Exactly right. I was just going to wait till you got to your explanation. We'd run through those numbers again. Commissioner Murguia.
So since we're on that topic, so what would we have done if we wouldn't have had extra money?
Well, what would we have done if there hadn't been underspending in the expenditure area?
Yes.
Yeah, well, then the fund balance would have declined. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if all of the expenditures had been, spent, then this number would have been a -3, and that number would have declined by 3 million. Yeah.
So are you saying the projects that you needed cash for were underfunded?
So only the juvenile center.
No, not the juvenile justice center and the what's the other one you said?
Fire station.
Yeah,
Fire station.
not those two. I'm talking about, you said the rest of the money went to some other
Yeah, so
project.
the thing is capital projects that are cash funded are expensed in this expenditure line. But if we want to continue to, if the project is in mid-completion and we want to finish it, we have to transfer it out of the general fund and move it to the capital project fund in order to get it completed because of the fiscal year. So it's just it's just basically moving the funds to the other line item.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
so on those items, were we short money? Is that why we had to give them the excess money that we had?
No, we weren't short money. We're just using budget out of here, and we moved it over here.
And
Yeah, they weren't short, they just weren't completed yet.
so were we supposed to complete them in the beginning? Or were they always supposed to end where they were at?
They were anticipated to be completed at the end of the fiscal year, but they didn't happen yet. Reggie's gonna talk more about that.
But who decides, if we set the budget and there was that amount of money for it, then who decides when there's extra money that it would go to complete a project? Did we approve the completion of that project in this year?
Well, we're not using extra money, it was just shifting the expense from here to here. The total budget remained the same.
If I can, Kathleen, and Commissioner Murguia, you hit on something, and I think that's what we discussed early on. We talked about that debt reduction. When we have excess dollars left over, who decides where those dollars go? It should be the commission's decision to move dollars out of one account to take care of another. I don't know if that's been the practice with the unified government. That's something I'm not familiar with. But to make decisions as to which projects get that infusion of cash
Right.
should, I guess the big question is, the commission should be notified or at least made aware or make the decision as to how those dollars will be spent on that project, or if those dollars will be spent on that project. Because when things go over budget, we're notified that we are over budget on a bid, and we then have to go back and negotiate. We've had that on the jail or the juvenile justice facility. So I do appreciate your question coming forward as to who makes that decision.
Yeah, and I just,
But these were all already budgeted, these projects. They didn't go over budget.
then why did we have to move money? Then why did we have to move money?
Because the operating fund can't carry forward projects from one year to the next. That's why. So right now, we have rules in place that, so the only place you can carry forward projects over a multi-year basis is in the capital project fund. That's why. So, unless you have the funds all encumbered, which they didn't have all the funds encumbered for those projects.
So we didn't have enough money encumbered to do those projects? Is that
Well, the bids hadn't been entirely completed, so
didn't have enough money?
encumber the funds. But we did have, no, we had all the money in place. All the budget was there. It's just that we didn't have them secured in our financial system so that they could be spent in the subsequent year unless we moved them out of the general fund and into the capital project fund where the rules are different.
But why didn't we do that?
Why didn't, so Reggie's going to talk about some of those projects.
Okay,
We can get there, yeah,
well, set tight.
okay. So on the revenue side, what we have is property tax and sales tax and then all these other revenue categories. This is with 100 of the fiscal year in place. We have, the property tax came in slightly above what was estimated. And just so you know, one of the positive things from this year is that the delinquency rate dropped. So it was estimated at roughly 6.5% and on the city side, and it dropped to, we're still finalizing the number, but it was in the low 5% area. Now, sales tax is roughly $4 million lower on the city sales tax side. And as I mentioned, we noticed that that was happening in the last quarter of the year. Other taxes,
just so we don't go too far. So that's a pretty big drop in sales tax. Do we know why that happened? Do you know where that happened?
well, so my sales tax estimate included a 6% increase, and clearly that was probably overly optimistic. So it's a combination of my sales tax estimate being overly optimistic and then the economy declining quicker than I anticipated, because you might remember I was anticipating a recession to happen sometime in mid-2019. So now we were looking at the vendor data, and there some of that impact for the legends, and some of that impact may be because the developers are in the middle of renovating a number of properties in the legends area, and so some of those properties are, not open and not collecting money during that transition. And so some of that is going on too. There's a lot of openings and closings and readjusting. So
Was the most of the sales tax loss then, was that in the Legends area?
I'm not sure I can actually say that, but it contributed. Yeah, contributing factor, yeah.
Was there any other place besides the Legends where we saw a significant sales tax? Not like we have a big sales tax base, but.
Well, I wasn't prepared to provide all that information right now, but one of the first workshops we have as part of the budget process is my revenue presentation, and I can provide all that information.
And so that really was.
By category and so forth.
Yeah, so I'm not referring to your projections unless you are, but you're saying, you're comparing actual sales tax collected versus what was actually collected the year prior, correct?
That's down here. So 2000.
So I just was saying, I wasn't talking about your projections. I was just talking about actuals. So we are seeing a 9 or 8% decrease in sales tax, regardless of your projections, right? Just.
Yeah.
That's all I was wondering. And I was just wondering, such a large decrease in sales tax. I just wondered if we knew why, and that's pretty significant, and where.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff?
You know, back to the property tax, you said that delinquencies went down actually over 1%. Do you think much of that is attributed to the fact that there have been a lot more properties going into the land bank, so therefore less properties being taxed?
No, I think it's because of the change in policy. I think Melissa could probably talk about that, but there's a change in policy where taxpayers are expected to pay the most recent year first, and then just the economy was better. People are, have jobs, and they're starting to pay their taxes more frequently.
So when you say that the policy changed to most recent taxes first, does that mean there's still back taxes that are sitting out there that have not been collected?
Well, they would probably be on a payment plan. There's a lot of payment plans that have been set up for those delinquent taxes. Yeah.
Kathleen, I just want to follow up with with Commissioner McGeeh's question, and I would have a tendency to believe that the loss of sales tax is due to some of the closures. In reference to the Legends, I believe here in this committee a couple of months back we had one of the developers in that was doing some work out at the Legends, and we were hoping to get some kind of report coming forward in reference to the progress being made out at the Legends to reincorporate those stores, get them back online, because it is revenue that affects our budget. And I'd have a tendency to believe that we will see a sales tax impact from the closure and from the construction and some of the other activities that are not in full swing out there.
Yeah.
But I would look forward to that information as other commissioners would.
On the general fund side, so the property tax also performed the same as on the city side. And then sales tax, which is less dependent on the county side, which is less impacted by the Legends. It was about $500,000 or $600,000 lower. Actually, one of the let me see if wanted to kind of go back to the city. Some of these other categories, all the other categories performed, as expected, right? Now, one category that was quite notable is that this one is miscellaneous transfers and transfers in. That also includes interest income, much of which is recorded in the county general fund. And our interest income was substantially more than we anticipated. So, and we expect that to continue next year as rates, and it's because rates rose so substantially throughout the year.
Kathleen, there was in the previous slide the 133% on intergovernmental revenues. On the previous slide, 133.6. You care to explain that?
Well, part of the increase is because the amount's not very much, so any kind of notable.
I just wanted to know what it was. What is intergovernmental revenues?
Well, grants and different grants that come in from other agencies.
Okay, yeah. I just wondered.
Because on the next slide it shows it being at only a 70%, and I was just curious if over the 33% would, if the 133%, you take that 33% and add it to that 77.1, we're even on both.
Well, this one's only 66, you know, thousand compared to 51,000. Whereas this one is about 200,000 short. So yeah, maybe so. Yeah. It's just when you have lower numbers, the percentages look bigger. But interest income really kind of saved the day this year. All right. So Reggie's going to talk about expenditures.
So on the screen now we have two views of the city general fund. One is budget to actuals, which is this one, and then this one compares the 2017's actuals to the 2018 actuals. So we see down here, total for the city general fund, we spent $144 million. That's 1.6% less than the budget, which is like $2.4 million. And one of the things that's key here is that we wanted to stay under around 100%. And we can see right here with miscellaneous transfers out, we did almost double that number, and that's the number that Kathleen is talking about, where we did the transfers out into the capital projects fund from here. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is because we have capital outlay here, where we had a $5.3 million budget, but we only spent $4.2 million in the year. And then so that leaves us like with $1.1 million. And we were able to transfer capital projects from here into the capital projects fund. But we also had $1 million that we moved for debt into the capital projects fund to pay for the new fire station. So all that did not come from here. It came from various places within the services and supplies up in the budget. But, some of the things that we moved, we have the new asset management security team. We were not able to get that all set up and running. We did spend some of the money, so we spent, or we moved like $280,000 for it. There was also money that we moved for. We weren't ready to move on purchasing land for a new fire station, so we moved money for that. So there are a host of like different projects that we did move, but then that's some of them.
Wait, we weren't ready to buy land for the new fire station?
So a new fire station down, so we have the new fire station for out west, but the new fire station for down the road, we weren't ready to move on that, but we had money in the budget for it. So we moved that into our new capital projects fund.
For this year?
For 19?
Yes. So we'll have that money. We won't have.
Why did we have to do that again?
So we won't have to like put it back in the budget and come request it within the capital budget process for the next year.
You lost me. So we had money in the 2018 budget for land acquisition for a fire station,
Yes.
but we didn't do that.
No, we did not.
And we moved the money to somewhere else.
So we moved it into our capital project fund, which will allow us to utilize the money down the road. Like
So now we don't have the
For
money.
the land.
No, we do have them.
For the land acquisition, yeah.
I'm sorry?
We moved it
From land,
capital project fund so that we could spend it in 19 for the land acquisition of the fire.
oh,
So what
Yeah.
moving the money into the capital projects fund allows us to do is to have the funding going down the road, and we won't have to put it back into the budget.
If I may, I think that's creating some of the confusion. When we have a project that's approved in a budget and it doesn't move forward, you're moving it into another fund so that it can be moved forward.
Yes.
And some of the questions we raise is, why didn't we do the land acquisition in 18?
So Public Works would probably give you a better explanation of that. My guess is because they couldn't find the land to do the project yet, so.
And also, I mean, we were still working on getting everything finalized with our current fire station that we're trying to build.
Out in Piper, yeah.
Well, first of all, I feel like you all, sorry, Tom, I feel like, I don't think anyone's saying anything negative to you all about your accounting. I don't want you to feel defensive about it at all. Hopefully not. Not for me anyway. But I will tell you, it is really frustrating that we budget money for projects in a particular year, and we know how our year budget goes. And if we don't think we can get that project done within that year, it's very confusing for all of us why we budget for it.
Yes.
Because, wow.
So this year, actually, well, and not to go out on a tangent, but this year we've asked the departments that have capital projects. I've said it repeatedly in our operations meetings, that if you have capital projects, start spending the money right now. Do the RFPs, get your engineers looking at the project, because we want all the money spent at the end of the year. And so,
I'll add to, and maybe Stephen can add as well. I mean, I think this is a recognized challenge that's being addressed by the administration of pushing projects through the pipeline. So recognizing the need for projects, and then there's a financial resources that the commission has allocated. There's a set of human resources that we recognize have been lagging to some degree behind that in terms of the ability to execute effectively on those dollars. So,
yeah.
So there's sort of two pieces of it. One, you want to make sure that we're able to execute those projects, and that we want to be able to execute them effectively, and not just rush and do it. So I think there's a planning piece and a financial planning piece of it, and then we're also catching up and making progress in this, but catching up on the human side of that to be able to execute effectively within the organization and with our private sector partners on those projects once the commission has said.
I have talked with the Public Works Director about potentially putting in place some administrative measures that would assist us in getting the resources, human resources, or the contract folks in place, so that we can move and get past the backlog.
So Commissioner, just to state this very directly, we're down 3 engineers right now, and that's been ongoing for some time. So we're trying to get staff back up, but even so, that's just on the public works side, so streets, stormwater. We're also looking at having to add another engineer to work in our wastewater division, because we have $1 billion worth of projects to complete in the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot sitting out there that with the very nimble staff that we have right now, we're trying to keep moving, and that does cause a problem, and we are all working together to try and figure out how we realign while trying to recruit employees to work in our engineering division, which has been an exceptional challenge given the strength that the economy has had. Even though it is starting to decline, what's in the pipeline is taking those folks to the private sector and making it very hard for us to recruit. So,
and I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah.
It is just,
I apologize.
when we see a budget item change to the extent that we did at the very beginning of our discussion, that will be an added cost in the budget. That'll show up as a cost in 2019, what 2018 was. And so this goes back to our questions as that we are posing, and we're not trying to point blame. We're just trying to follow how the budget works to the extent that we can be better partners in helping put this budget in a manner that will allow us all to fully understand how we can make it better for the public to understand. It's all about the transparency aspect.
Yeah. Thank you.
There were, just lastly, there are also leadership transitions, I think, specific to these projects. So the building and logistics had a new director selected last year. Likewise, the fire chief came on in August of last year. So I think those also have an impact on these projects.
Well, if I might offer a suggestion, when you have a project in 18 that's not completed, maybe what we need to do is have fire station or XYZ 40% completed. Out of the $5 million that was set aside, they are at 2.8 million. Therefore, the remainder is going to be carried over into 2019. We expect this project to be completed such and such a date. Those small explanations assist us in seeing things that I think are easier for some of us to digest. I won't speak for the rest of the commission. They're quite capable of doing it themselves, but I have a specific way I like to look at things. I don't want to have to go hunting and searching. It should be pretty transparent when I go into it. So I might just make a suggestion that on these projects, if they're 40% completed by the end of 18, tell us it's 40% completed, it was 4.2 million or whatever it was, and then 2019 we'll look for whatever's necessary.
Yeah, so, you know, so it's kind of hard to know how much detail you want. We try to give, you know, the broad, bigger picture, but we're happy to give you as much detail because we have it all. So
are we taking on, is the commission asking for the number of staff that we have to do too many projects? Because you didn't say it was just this year, you said it's ongoing.
Yes, well,
it's been an ongoing
problem. There's a backlog right now, yeah.
There's a backlog of projects.
Yes.
How backlogged?
It depends on which area that you're referring to. Some are moving more quickly than others.
Okay, I don't care what project it is. How far back are we backlogged on any project?
Well,
how far back do some of them go?
That's too broad of a question for me to be able to easily answer here right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some that are further backlogged than others, but it's just like if you're talking stormwater projects, you know, that's a funding dependent thing. So those maybe aren't as backlogged because we don't have funding, so we're not moving forward with them. But if you're talking about certain types of street repairs, that's a different situation. Mm-hmm. If it's annual maintenance, we seem to spend that down fairly well, but on the bigger capital projects, there can be delays. Some of them we control, others we don't. I'm happy to sit down with you and public works staff to kind of go over those. On wastewater, yeah, we're behind. I mean, that's probably our biggest one, where we've been working on this consent decree and we don't get the projects executed as quickly as we'd like to. So we employ a lot of outside contractors to help us try to move these things forward, but certain things just have to be done by staff. So we do have bandwidth issues.
So one approach to deal with this is to, which is what has been utilized in other cities I've worked in, is to set up, well, contract out for program or project management and charge those costs to the project directly. And that way then we increase the human resources part of managing our projects and include, you know, partner with the private sector more in order to move this out but some of it is not within our control. For example, with the consent decree, or, you know, you work on a bid package, you put it out, and then the construction costs are much higher, and then you have to go back and find more budget or work with the commission, and then go put out to bid again and so forth.
How big is the backlog that we do control?
Well, so, I mean, it's just, there's so many projects, it's hard to answer that question specifically. Yeah.
This is something that we could come back and discuss with you guys, but right now I'm not prepared to answer those questions. We're just getting ready to go into our CIP, and we'll be having conversations about sort of what's moving and what's not moving.
Yep, but that's May.
And that would be actually in May a good time for us to come back when we'll be with the whole commission to kind of talk through where we're at on this. Mm-hmm. But it is a challenge, and it's not a challenge that I haven't seen in other communities I've served in, but we are particularly challenged here for the last few years, and we're working through that. You know, we've lost our county engineer. I mean, I can go through the list of things that have happened to get us backlogged, but it's, you know, it's just an excuse, so.
Mr. Bryant, this will be the last question for the sake of expediency. I do want to move on, but I do appreciate the discussion, and I think this will come up at a later time for the full commission.
Mine's not so much a question, it's just a comment. You know, I can only see it from the budget side that I see at the BPU, and we run into similar issues, and the concern, you know, that the board has there is that a project that is projected to happen in a certain time frame and doesn't happen also adds the additional cost that the next year you're going to have cost of living, you know, increases for the wages for the employees that'll be doing the work. There's going to be, you know, very susceptible to material change, and prices rarely go down, they go up. So when you sit there and you're looking at this laundry list of projects that total however many millions of dollars they are, the next year that same number of million of dollars no longer covers those projects, and now requires 3 to 5 to 6, 8% more. So I think over there, that is one of ours about the expediency, is if you don't believe that you really have a chance of completing a project in that time period, please don't bring it forward as a budget item during that time period. So
Tom, I just said for expedience purposes, I know people aren't prepared, but the problem is you all deal with this every day. By the time you talk to me in May, I'm up here once a week. So I don't always remember this. Maybe all of you do, but I'm not that good. So the problem is when you wait, you forget what you asked and you know what the problem was, or at least I do. So I do just have one more small question is, so with the backlog of projects, would it be worth our while to temporarily outsource those projects to get them done and caught up while we're working on the staffing issue?
I'm not going to answer for my public works director. I'd much rather those questions be posed to him directly and how they're trying to handle this. I mean, I know we're working on a whole variety of different things. I know they've discussed this with Kathleen as well, and we just brought on a new deputy who's over that area to try and help us get things moving. So I think that would be appropriate conversation if we wanted to bring them back in and have a conversation about that, but I'm not prepared. I wasn't prepared for that tonight, and therefore I would be doing them a disservice.
I might suggest that the message be sent that there has been much discussion in reference to the backlog of projects, and see what kind of feedback we can get or some kind of input back to the committee for the next month's meeting. Would that be satisfactory to committee members? Okay.
Just a list of unfinished 2018 projects would be helpful.
Okay, great, thank you.
2017 and 2016.
I want to know. Yeah.
That hasn't been.
I want to know how back. I mean, what I want to know is what's the most. I'm just curious. Seriously, I'm just curious. What's the most backlog project we have? If it's like 2010, I mean, I'm concerned, but I just want to know. It's just I'm curious, and I mean that we're in control of. I understand there's some we're not in control of, like the non-funded sewer mandate. But I want to know how far back the unfunded projects go.
And we just moved a $453 million project in front of a whole bunch of other stuff because we receive federal funds. So these are the types of out of control things that are not, you know, within our purview, and we've had to allocate resources that direction as well. So it's, you know, it's not just one thing, but yes, we will get that information and bring it back to you guys.
At the next meeting, yeah.
Great.
One other thing, and I'm going to jump in, I apologize because I realize we're trying to get wrapped up here, but you know, we talked about taking funds for a project that are allocated for a project, let's say in 2018, project doesn't get done. We put them in a fund so we can roll them over into 2019 when we're actually going to finish the project. We spend that money in 2019, it's not budgeted in 2019. How do we account for that?
So, well, no, if we move it over to the capital project fund.
So we rebudget
budget
it.
Authority goes with it.
We rebudget it.
Yeah, well, it's reappropriated. Yeah.
It doesn't become part of the next year's budget, though.
Yeah.
It's in its own fund.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's not included to make the next year's budget larger.
So, Commissioner McKiernan, I want to tell you that most cities, well, the general fund is supposed to be the operating fund, all right? The capital project fund is the capital project fund. So any outlay here really ought to be just for small items like furniture or some smaller equipment. Any larger things ought to be in the capital project fund. This city, the unified government has done things a little differently. And so there are larger capital project fund budgets that are cash funded in the general fund. And if we were to discuss potentially adjusting the way in which we budget these so that all of the capital is in the capital project fund, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So.
I would fully endorse and support that discussion to make this a lot cleaner to follow.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, we can get a report on those, the request of Commissioner Murguia in reference to those projects and the length of time that the furthest back, I believe, is what you requested, Commissioner. If we could find out which one of those, it would help the commission. You know, I might strongly suggest that bringing these forward for review, that the entire commission have a chance to hear some of these, some of the length of time it's taking some of these projects, some of the reprioritization, because I believe that we are the ones that interface with the public when they're not seeing the project completed or projects moving forward. It would be beneficial for us if we had an opportunity to at least talk about if we're wanting to move on one project and stall another one because of expediency or whatever may come forward. I might strongly suggest to my fellow commissioners that this would be information that we should be aware of and make those decisions accordingly, or at least have an opportunity to hear of them at a full commission meeting to make a statement if we need it be. Please, let's continue.
Currently on the screen, we have a view of the 2018 budget to actuals for the county general fund. Again, we have two views, just like we did for the city general fund. We have one view where we compare what the 2018 budget was and then what it compared to is what the 2018 actuals were. Then at the bottom of the screen, we have a comparison of the 2017 actuals to the 2018 actuals. So we can look right here. We had a almost $63 million budget. And out of that, we had like $1.3 million left over. Also from here, we did send $1 million to the new juvenile center that we were going to build. That is included within here, and we still had $1 million left. We did transfer $1.2 million, which is in here where we're 53% over. And included in that was, I mentioned the asset management team we have as far as for the new security, and then we also have the courthouse security. We moved some money into 2019 for those, and then we also had money that we moved over for the district attorney for the
task force. Oh, yeah.
For the grand jury that we had going over the state. So we moved funding over for that. So that's what's included over there. Are there any questions about the county general fund? So here we have all unified government tax levy funds. On the left-hand side, we have the revenues, and then the right-hand side in orange, we have the actuals for the expenditures. And one of the key things we want to look for here is it's good to be over 100% on this side, and if you're over 100% over here, that's not such a good thing. So we see we got one fund aging, which was right at 100%, but most everything is under 100%. And here we have a view of all the funds. So we have all the other funds that are included here. This includes like our special tax funds. And again, key thing to look for on the revenue side is it's good if we're over 100%. And then on the expenditure side, it's good if we're below 100%. And you see, we don't have anything over 100. We have some things that are right at 100. That means we spent up all the money.
Yeah.
Any questions there?
As I mentioned, just to rehash just briefly, the financial policies reference the reserves and the use of the balances or the use of the excess above the target. So our reserve policy, as I mentioned, it refers to the CAFR, modified accrual basis of fund balances, not the cash basis. So we are going to be pulling all that together, those fund financial statements, in time for our next ED&F committee meeting. So at that time, we'll be doing those calculations and showing those to you. So I think you remember last year, we demonstrated how, so by fund and how much the fund balance grew, or the net margin, and then what the new fund balance is. And then you can see what percentage of the expenditure that was and how that compares with the target for that fund. So for example, here's all the targets for the various special revenue funds. And here's the rest of the special revenue funds. There's quite a few of them. The excess of reserves, the 5 areas, just as a reminder, are if there's excess, well, of course we're not just talking general fund, but also special revenue funds when they're available, is to fund maybe some accrued liabilities, pension, workers' comp, the health fund. We can also appropriate lower amounts towards special obligation bonds and increase the cash-funded capital projects. We can reduce the property tax mill rate or any other kind of charges for services. We can use one-time projects that would potentially, those projects would reduce operating costs in the future, or start a new program if that fits within the long-range financial plan. Okay. And again, this is the general fund reserve. It's a percentage. It's a minimum level of unrestricted fund balance based on the CAFR modified accrual basis. So this is the target. This is the target where we're on right now. This would be one we may potentially work towards in the future. So these are all the targets for these respective funds. And then also the same applies for these enterprise funds. All right. So that's all I got for this presentation.
Any further questions? Seeing none, this was for, does the public have any comment on this? Let it be seen, and then nobody step forward. With that, this was for information only, so I sincerely appreciate the time you've given us for our questions. And if there's nothing else, we'll just move on to item number 2, which is the fourth quarter budget revision report. So I'm to understand that Mr. Lindsay will be doing the presentation?
Yes.
Reginald, it's all yours, buddy.
All right. So usually when we have budget revisions that are over $10,000, we send them to the county administrator's office. And if they're over $50,000, they require the mayor and the county administrator's office to sign off on. So for the fourth quarter, we had 20 transactions. And of those, 5 transactions required funding from outside the departments. And then the other 15 required funding from inside the departments.
Said over $10,000 the county administrator, over 50 is the mayor and the county administrator.
Yes.
No, because I was here when we changed that policy, and if it's over 50, it has to come back to the standing committee for the commissioner.
So if it's over $50,000 and it's operational, it goes to the mayor and the county administrator. If it's a discretionary, it comes back to the commission. So that's like if we were going to be purchasing a piece of property or something like that. But if it's operational and there's something needed to make sure that operations at the unified government day-to-day can keep going.
Is that an interpretation that it's after our occupation?
No.
I remember having that discussion when we made the new policy.
Yeah, no, I copy pasted from the previous, the language was all, it didn't change. That part of the language didn't change.
Well, like Commissioner McGee, I remember when we made the policy change, and I don't remember having any discussion about whether it was operational or discretionary. I thought anything over 50,000 had to come to the commission.
Right. Well, whatever the language was prior to our changing of the policy, that's what it was in this regard. I didn't change it. But we can always explore and discuss it and change the policy in the future.
Well, what would you guys like to do? I can have them restate the policy, have them bring the.
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Brian, were you here?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely I was. I'd like to just review, because I thought I remembered anything over 50. It's back here, yeah.
I might suggest that at next budget meeting, we have clarification on that piece of policy for the commission's review.
I can send you a link to the our website that has all the policies, and I can show you where it is.
That's,
But we can discuss it at the next meeting.
I believe you guys that what you're telling us is the policy. What we're saying is that that's not the policy change that we recommended or we talked about.
or we approved.
Or we approved, right. So I believe you. Again, it has nothing to do with the two of you. We're just saying whoever, I don't remember who was here that we made the change with, but that wasn't what was said.
Commissioner Townsend, please.
You know what I'd like to have? This is the benefit of this being taped. I'd like us to roll the tape because I remember both points. I remember, and I couldn't tell you what it was, but it had to do with the expediency of the change. I thought, I'm pretty sure there was discussion about a $50,000 amount, but just so we're all clear, I would like staff to go back. The very last time this was discussed, I couldn't tell you when. We may have to enlist the assistance of Madam Clerk in her office on those key words and bring back the transcript so we can all next time be on footing. That's the value of having this taped, and then we can go on. I think everybody, as Commissioner says, Commissioner Urguia says, we know you're cutting and pasting, you're bringing us what it was, but just so we collectively can recollect the discussion, I think I'd like to see the transcript so we can move on. Thank you.
Mr. Bryant?
Yeah, and it may be that it was the expediency factor that there may be situations come up that can't wait for the next meeting to be able to act upon, but if even in those cases, then it should come back and be notified of why it was made after the fact so that people are well aware, the public is well aware of why things are happening, and then we can kind of look at, was it a one-time thing that was just an emergency, or did we not fund it a situation correctly or expect a result?
That was the exact discussion that we had.
I think so.
Is it to come back even if,
No matter what.
even if you had to do, even after the fact?
I wanted to make 2 points. The first is that our accounting procedures require us to not exceed the budget at the fund level, okay? So any kind of revisions that are happening, regardless of the amount, right? They're getting taken from other areas of the budget. So we're not exceeding the budget. Do you understand? We're just moving funds amongst the line items. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Not spending money we didn't author. I don't think anybody's saying that.
Just want to make sure.
No, no.
So I think most of it was understanding why the funds are needing to be transferred, the reasons behind the shortfall.
When we see a budget revision of just $750,000 at the end of the year, 705,000, that's a significant amount of money. So
That's across all funds, you realize, yeah, the 376 million, so.
any other questions? Does any member of the audience want to address this issue? Are you finished, Mr. Lindsay?
Yes, I am.
No other questions? This, again, was for information purposes only, and we do have a commitment to bring back that information.
I found the policy.
4 years ago?
The one that's currently posted on our website.
Well, I think the whole thing is, has there been a mutation over the years of what our original intent was?
Okay.
I surely was not implying, I believe them that what the policy says, it says, but the policy is not reflective of what we discussed then. Because that discussion that we had was about anything over $50,000, and we specifically said what Jeff said, that we understand some things require that action need to be taken immediately, but the following meeting we should be notified.
Yeah. That's what item 7B here says. The county administrator is authorized to approve budget revisions that exceed $50,000 for matters involving health and safety concerns, other emergencies, or to sustain ongoing operations, subject to the approval of the mayor or the mayor pro tem if the mayor is absent. These revisions will then be reported to the next scheduled meeting of the Economic Development Finance Standing Committee. So I guess the interpretation is health and safety concerns, other emergencies, or to sustain ongoing operations.
I think so with that, I think we should look at the tape, because I'm not sure that that policy reflects what was on the tape.
Okay.
I was here, and I do have a really good memory on stuff like that.
Fourth quarter. Okay. Seeing none, again, I just want to reiterate this was for information purposes only. No other questions from commission or public. We'll move on to item number 3, which is an update on the performance of the customer service initiatives for the motor vehicle registration program. And we will hear from members of the Treasury and the Finance here to make presentations. As soon as you have a seat, you can start.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Rick Benkesek and Andrea Parra from the Treasury Division. And they're going to be making this presentation. Andrea's going to be making the presentation, and Rick will answer any questions if you have any of him.
Well, welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
Hey everybody. So we are here to present kind of what the last year looked like in motor vehicle. First thing we wanted to touch on is just kind of what we as a team produced. Just under 39,000 new title and registration transactions, a little over 108,000 renewals, current existing owners coming in to renew their vehicles, and then like to point out there was a section of about 30,000 miscellaneous transactions. That's going to include a lot of back office work, no cost transactions that are included in productivity at just a lower level processing time. It is down from last year, as you probably can tell, either outside our control, people moving counties, leaving the state, things that we can't control, just some additional activity. We had a lot of staff leave in terms of going to different departments, getting promoted, outside the organization, bettering their career. So there is some delay in business productivity, but we had more quality, I would say, than quantity this year. Quick idea, renewal breakdown. Rick and I have the idea that we're trying to get the lower percentage of what is the in-office to become online. We have lowered it by half In 2018, we were about 23% of our renewals did their vehicles online. Compared to 2014, it was only 12%. Few years difference. Obviously, Pay It is the ideal situation that went live this last April, so we're about a year in from ICANN through the motor vehicle of the state. Hopefully those numbers and colors will be complete opposite here in a year or two is the goal. If you do not know, we use the AwesomeQ form site survey system. It's connected to each other. In 2018, we did about 2,800 surveys. We narrowed them down. It's about a 420 total count increase. Part of the whole idea of educating the county is also getting their feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. So our staff's pushed to make sure they talk about it at the beginning, middle, and end of every transaction. Whether they got their ticket online or in the office, it's just something we mention. Hey, go online, rate our service, tell us how it was.
If I may, I just have to state, I had just went through this myself personally. The state's platform is horrible. I went through our local unit of government, streamlined. I was done in 20 minutes at the most. With the state, I spent 3 hours and still could not get into the portal. It was terrible. So I just want to say thank you for the commitment to get this done for our community.
You know, unfortunately for motor vehicle, it was out of our control. We couldn't use Pay It, but with, you know, the team Allen and Pay It themselves, we're making it more favorable for Wyandotte County specifically. Not just ICANN, but my YCO is the goal. If we can make that better, he may address to that, but we're willing to do what we can.
I'll just add to that, as Andrea gave an update, I think it was last month or the month before, about the property tax payments. Again, the growth in online accounts, now we're above 4,000 in online accounts. A lot of that's due to the Treasury staff helping people get set up. And so that enables the ability to then begin to both turn them onto the tool, but then allow for notifications. So that again, that graph she was showing in terms of the trend lines, you want to see more of that go to online. And the more people we can kind of lock into online accounts, the more services we can layer onto that. So it builds upon its own success.
Next slide just kind of shows a comparison of what the results of those surveys. 2018, overall you'll see the check-in system, 86% was favorable, and then a little bit low of 13% unfavorable. To be honest with you, the unfavorable is more foreseen circumstances that are not truly check-in, but you know, our title exceeded the wait time, we can't help them, and I think they kind of misunderstand sometimes what the actual check-in system issue is versus what I would throw in the customer service helping them or not being able to help them. Hot topic for me, customer service at 91%. My goal personally, I can speak for Rick as well, is that we would love that to always stay above 90%. We may not be able to help you, but how did we do while you were waiting? And that's the goal, to make sure that we're always doing what we can, even if the service is not provided at the time of business transaction. Overall knowledge, 94%, a little lower than last year. I believe personally I've signed more PANs than I could ever tell you. Unfortunately, we're getting people in, they get promoted or they leave our department, but we are strongly showing that education, elaborating on training, give them the understanding before they ever meet someone that they know what they're doing for the sake of first-time transactions. Overall experience, 83%, not as palatable as we usually are. We're usually at about 90% there. I just think we've been a little understaffed for the last few months, and we're making do with what we have, but also making sure that customer service is not suffering for the sake of not having a full staff at the frontline level.
Do you think the staff levels are responsible for the increase in unfavorable responses across the board?
Commissioner, during the year, we had 9 people that we lost from the front line. There's 14 people up there. And the majority of the ones we lost 6 that transferred to other departments within the unified government, which I support because they're growing their career. And those are good people that are going and serving other parts of the government, but we have to replace them. And so I don't think there's any question that some of the areas where we started seeing some of our regression was due to having to replace such a large part of our group. And then of course, every time you lose a person, it takes us about 2 months to get them replaced in the door. And then there's a couple of weeks before they're really making contributions on the line. 9 people, that's 18 months of productivity we lost during the year on the line. I don't think there's any question that that played a role.
Thank you.
All right, next one would be graph of what exactly you're looking at in terms of types of complaints. We mainly go through every survey every month, and we track exactly of the negative or the not so palatable complaints, what they really attested to. Wait time will probably be the highest just because we are a large county with a lot of new titles. Just under 38,000 new vehicles came in that 14 people have to register for the most part. Second highest will be customer service. Our goal is to lower those. There are some things outside our control. Here at the courthouse area, buildings is kind of high due to the parking situation that we see currently. Fees and taxes, out of our control. We did this last year add the website as a piece. That's not a strong percent because I just added it Q3 of 2017 and 18. I noticed a big trend of people just having problems getting online, checking in online, seeing where those links are. Did some studies, other counties, and made it easier to see as best as we can. And if we continue to see those surveys come back, we'll keep adjusting as we need. Wanted to just throw in, this slide kind of just dictates exactly what it looks like with what you may have heard before is we call them red days. 4 days out of every month, we expect high volumes of service. They're first 2 days of every month and the last 2 days of every month. They only make up 20% of the whole month, but we only get 36% of our complaints on those days. We have everybody, all hands on deck, even staff to my level. If I need to, we'll be up there doing what I can to assist. If someone's gone, we have multiple staff that are out this last year, as he mentioned. Anybody that can do a motor vehicle transaction, we will have somewhere helping out. And then the rest of the complaints would fall under the other days, which is middle of the month, middle of the week, just random days. It's about 64%. A few samples of some surveys exact from the website. Of course, names and personal information would have been pulled out. I can't tell you how many times I look just spot checking from time to time, like yesterday, or excuse me, Friday was a very busy day. 1 negative for 10 positive. So it's really not just, unfortunately I had a bad situation, but I'm here to report exactly how good they're doing. And it's good to see at a, management level team member that we really are doing what we say we want to do. Title cutoff slide kind of shows the goal. Goal is set up based on when we initially set up goals to cut title work off when we had 1 queue for everything. It was a combination of 5 business days, 2 days, Monday, Friday, we cut off 2 is the goal, and then 3:30 is Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, averaging out to get about 2.54. So 2 p.m., no later than 3 is the goal to hit every day. As you see, we weren't at the goal, but we were very close to the goal. It's noteworthy to know that this actually is the best year we've done in a really long time. 2016, it was 4:02 is the average time we cut off. 4:02 is amazing. We close at 5. We were fully staffed when I came back up in 17. It was good to see, and we're going to get there soon. But we're just not quite there yet. Few efforts that Rick and the management team we've started doing. It's kind of starting in a time frame. Full service last February, we added the bilingual option on our Awesome Queue system. We walk in the office, you can fully start in Spanish to the end, checking in and getting your tickets online, or in office. That's a change to the kiosk. KDOR, as I mentioned earlier, we went live with ICANN, merging it with my WICO. Another change that KDOR proposed, as you probably have heard, is the digital license plate production that went live last August. It's a huge change. 105 years, getting your plate the same way can be quite hard to chew on, but we've got a lot of positive results. People are getting their plates quickly. From what I understand, there's not really a lot of issues there, but the state's really receptive to helping out when something comes up. Here at the local level, our office upgrades, we installed safety barriers and Camdex badge access door out at the annex, and are partially implemented of a new microphone and PA system there as well. I started again a year and a half ago, and it was the first day that we did his walkthrough. I told him that it's necessary. It's just a safety concern, and we got it finally, and we're almost finished with the full PA system, number system. That way anyone in the back of the office, front of the office can hear, lobby, you can hear your number called clearly. As you may understand, Annex is probably our heavy volumed office at this point. So they are transitioning from what would have been the courthouse as our heavy hitter. Annex is now the busier office of the two, so it was a very necessary need. A few improvements, we added FAQ PowerPoint to both lobbies. One of our TVs was not really being utilized to its fullest, so we took off what was on there, which is just an additional where you are in line screen, and now give them, I believe it's a 20+ page full, how do I do, what do I do, what do I need type of environment if you haven't been to the lobbies. That way, if you are choosing to wait in line or if you need to sit in the lobby, you can kind of prep yourself on what you need before you get up to the window. Another change we made that we have hopefully full implementation by the end of this last quarter, far as I'm concerned, effective now, today, is we are pushing all constituents to do their CMV, commercial motor vehicle transactions, through email. So they can request on an email address, we can review their paperwork, email it, send it in. They can even get to an invoice level, walk in and finish within 5-10 minutes. Commercial motor vehicle can take a minimum of an hour if you really are doing a full service commercial transaction. So it's alleviated a lot of our wait time, and it's allowing upper level staff to do this at the back office level. Training, as he mentioned, we do put the new hires through a 2-week training period. We've extended it a few days to allow for some additional training, some exposure from all levels of our staffing from the front to the top, including myself and Rick. Shadowing, being able to really see what you're going to be doing before you're doing it. And then we're also going through a full overhaul of training, which is, we just started this last spring. Now we're trying to get every person involved. Again, like I said, up to Rick and I. A few other items we did, we implemented what's called a Treasury Improvement Plan. It's called TIP. It's a committee of our own employees that are part of recruitment, retirement parties, birthday celebrations, all kinds of spirit weeks. They meet, they have a newsletter. It's pretty cool to see just your own staff talking about what we want to improve on from our last October training and really working with each other. I think that was it. Yeah. Any questions for Rick or I?
Any questions of the committee members?
I have a comment. From my personal experience and from just the comments I get from residents, I think things are better in 2018 than in 2017. So I'm sorry the data doesn't really bear that out, but I'm glad to see the status of the process improving. So good for you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Truly appreciate it very much. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, again, this is for information purposes only. We appreciate your effort and your presentation. Committee, item number 4 is the ordinance adopting the redevelopment district plan for project area number 1, the downtown grocery redevelopment district. This is no stranger to us. So as soon as Catherine Carter gets seated, she'll make her presentations. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Good evening, Catherine Carter, Director of Economic Development. So we've got 2 items on the docket today, and I will just first start kind of draw your attention to the photo, or rendering, I guess it's not a photo, although it's a very nice rendering, of the what is proposed to be the downtown grocery store. This is not exactly how it's going to look. We've already made some tweaks. Some of the colors, it's going to have kind of more of a brick type of facade. That canopy is not going to be quite so large. Some other things, but that's kind of the general idea of what it's going to look like. This did go through the preliminary design plan, went through Planning Commission as well as full commission just here last week, and the final design plan will go to Planning Commission on the 8th of April, so 1 week from today. Oh, and this is Chris Fukas. Sorry, I should introduce my visitors. Chris Fukas is with Sunflower Development, and they're assisting us on some of the financing, so he'll be talking about new market tax credits, so stay tuned. A couple things. So tonight, what we're going to be looking at is an ordinance that would approve the project plan for the TIF. So this is back a couple months ago, you approved the entire district kind of boundaries, and this would be specifically for that project area 1. And then the second is a resolution to create 2 nonprofit entities. This has to do with new market tax credits. We'll get into what all that means here in a minute. So before we get more specifically into these 2 items, we do want to go through and give you an update on the grocery store financing. This is something that we've been working very diligently, trying to make sure that we are the best stewards of public taxpayer money as we possibly can, and make sure that we're able also to provide a grocery store that will be able to serve the entire community. It's a full service grocery store, all of that. So I will draw your attention to this is kind of the large buckets that we're looking at. Title costs, $27,000. The big ones, of course, are construction costs, so that's hard costs, just over $3 million. Soft costs, that's all your architects, engineering, all that good stuff. Fixtures, furnishings, and equipment, about $1.5 million. So that would be all of the refrigeration, all of the shelving and lighting and all of that. That would be inside of the store. Contingency, that's 5% of each the construction costs, the soft costs, and the fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. Cost of issuance, there will be some bonds that are included in this project. And then the opening kind of startup fund, $150,000. This is just to ensure that we have all the staff is trained and all the items are ready to go when we said they will be. So all of that, we get to $6 million. And I do want to point out that we are moving forward ideally with a TIF. Of all these costs, we only have about $900,000 of the costs that are TIF eligible costs. So there's that. And I will pass it over to Kathleen to explain where the sources of these funds come from.
So we have been working on a pro forma. We've worked closely with Chris Fukas here, who's joined us, as well as other members of the financing team and bond counsel. And of course, these numbers will still move slightly, but this is our projections of the various sources of funds to pay for the $6 million project. So we are anticipating to dedicate $913,000 in property tax increment. Keep in mind that's the limit, because there are state statutes that limit the type of costs that can be reimbursed from property tax TIF. In reality, if we were to provide 100% tax, TIF for the entire 20-year period, the total on a net present value equates to $2 million. So there is an excess of the amount that we are able to spend, which we hope to be able to utilize on other development projects for the other project plans or project areas surrounding project area A, or 1, right? The sales tax, sales and use revenue, this is the revenue generated from the grocery store itself. And I will talk about some of the assumptions in the following slides. All right, so this is over a 20-year period as well. UG cash contribution of $2 million, which is coming from the Special Asset Fund. There was, in 2018, there was a $4 million appropriation for projects, and we utilized $2 million. Actually, we transferred $2.4 million at year end because we were still working on this pro forma, and since then we finalized it. So we transferred a little bit too much, and so ultimately at the end of the project, we'll move the funds back to the Special Asset Fund. But $2 million out of the four, there remains substantial amount remaining in that fund for other projects as well. We are also looking at a LISC loan. This is actually going to be paid for over 15 years at a low interest rate of 3%. It's part of their healthy food financing initiative. And so these two projects, these two amounts here are being funded at the moment by a temporary note that we issued for 2019. And once the project's completed, then we'll go to permanent financing as we typically do. And they will be, but there'll be a TIF and then a special obligation backed by the general fund, right? But right now they're being, during the contract or construction period, they're part of the temp note that we issued in February. Whereas this one will be, because of the loan structure, this one will be a private placement, geo-backed private placement, which we'll be doing later on this year. The new market tax credits, we're estimating net of all fees and costs to be $1 million. And then the grocers' revenue sharing is an amount to be determined. The total project estimate equates to the same amount as the project costs, or a little bit over. And our net present value, these are all net present value figures, and we're using 3.3%, which is the same as the UG borrowing costs. So the next 4 or 5 slides have details of the assumptions for each of these revenue sources. I can, if you don't have any questions, I can move to that one. Okay. Oh, the very first? Or this one?
What's the $150,000 startup fund for again?
That was part of the development agreement, but Catherine can talk about it.
That was something that was in the management agreement. It's basically to cover all opening costs. So it's, I believe, fairly flexible. I'd have to go back and see exactly what that covers. But it's to make sure kind of that time between the time the building is complete and then the time that it actually opens to kind of get everything in place for an opening.
What in the world could cost $150,000 once the building is built and we have a grocery provider? What could cost $150,000? You mentioned earlier when you started, you said it was for staff training. That, I mean, hopefully we're not hiring and training and staff for the grocery store, because that's supposedly why we have a grocery tenant. So I want to know what in the world could cost $150,000. I mean, surely not a banner and balloons. I mean, I want to know. I mean, I understand it's a $6 million project, but I've just never seen that.
Yeah. Yeah, I will, I want to make sure I am explaining it correctly. So if you are fine with it, I will email the entire group with exactly what.
You said it's outlined in what agreement?
In the management agreement with the Mark.
And who saw that? Did we see that management agreement?
Yeah, it came through the commission.
So the management agreement came through, and it detailed there what the 150,000 was supposed to be spent on.
Yeah.
So if I look up the management agreement, it'll tell me that.
It should.
I have a quick question on the slide before you. I'm confused by estimated cost. Is that of the tax increment, for example?
Oh, that should, yeah.
No, that's yeah, clearly the table got copy pasted and they forgot, and someone forgot to change.
What should that be titled?
Estimated revenue.
Estimated revenue.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
See, it's the same.
Sorry about that.
Good catch. So, all right, so property tax increment, I'm gonna go over these real quick, all right? So so we are valuing the property once it's completed we're estimating it to be $3 million. That has an assessment ratio of 25% because it's commercial. We're projecting that property value will increase by 2.9% annually. That's based on an prior year 8-year average. So over the future term, 2.9% per year. Total mills are 148.223, and it includes all of those jurisdictions. It does exclude 29.9, which is the amount that is by statute we're required to hold harmless. So that's why you're probably expecting about 180 or 170, high 170s of it. It's because we have to deduct out that 29.5 mils. The clock would start, we're anticipating in 2019. And so the total revenues from TIF, as I mentioned before, are $2.8 million or $2 million on a net present value basis, but only 919,000 can be paid for project costs in the project area number 1. Sales tax assumptions. The grocery store is conservatively based on the latest Merck study, which included the grocery store in its current location. We had a previous study that had the grocery store on 10th in Minnesota, but we had them update that. So their projection is $385 per square foot. We have 9,500 grocery retail space. That isn't the total space of the building. That's just the specific grocery store saleable square footage, all right? Or where actual sales happen, so. And if uninflated, if you just did the math, it's roughly $3.65 million annually. We have had to discount the taxable sales, which is that number there, by 40% because this is based on to account for our expectation of SNAP clientele. And that is based on data that we've determined from Sunfresh. So there is a ramp up of the sales. So, well, we have the first year at 25% because there's a late opening. The second year, 75, third year, 80, fourth year, 85, 90, and 100. These are the same ramp up or step up percentages that Merck recommends in their study. So we are using a growth rate of 2.5%. Of course, the local sales tax is 1% in the city and 0.938 of the county portion. There is no CID. And so the total annual, actually over the 20-year period is $1.1 million or on a net present value of $819. And that's how much those bond proceeds will be for that. once we take it out. So back to the bonds. On the TIF side, as I mentioned, we issued temporary notes, but in the future, we'll have general obligation TIF bonds, $913,000, which are only the projected TIF eligible costs. We're using a 3.3% interest rate over 20 years. The payments would work out, if we were to pay them on a level basis over the 20 years, would be $63,000 a year, beginning in 2020. We don't have any capitalized interest because we're not issuing the bonds until after the construction is already completed. Since they're general obligation backed TIF, we don't need a debt reserve. And the annual revenue stream is $149,000 or almost $150,000. So you can tell that this bond issue is likely to get paid off early, or we can use the difference between those funds, set them aside, and dedicate them for another project area adjacent in the same TIF district. On the sales tax side, if we were to issue these as special obligation general fund backed, the proceeds would be $820,000, same interest rate as with the assumption for the TIF. The payment would be $56,000 beginning in 2020. Same, there's no cap interest, cap I, there's no debt reserve. And the annual revenue stream is averaging about $59,000 or $60,000. Kind of depends because we have those initial years where there's a ramp up. So there's a little bit of a shortfall at the beginning years, but then it picks up at the tail end. So the average coverage is 1.04. As I mentioned, there's a $4 million appropriation available in 18 out of the special asset fund, and we transferred $2.4 million to this capital project for the grocery store, the downtown grocery store. The LISC loan, as I mentioned, that's going to be a private placement secured by a UG annual appropriation clause. The loan itself is 1.25%. It's going to be 3% for 15 years, and that's sort of a blended amount. They have a 0% healthy food funding source, which they're going to be supplementing with some other funding sources within their organization internally in order to get the 3% low rate. The payments would be roughly $105,000 a year. There does include a 1% loan origination fee, which would be netted from the bond proceeds or the loan proceeds. And so well, we're still discussing the expected repayment source, but we're still working through that. But the actual backing would be an annual appropriation from from a fund that we'll discuss in the future with you. We haven't decided which fund to go with. And then now we're going to get to the new market tax credits, where I'm going to talk with, or I'm going to have Chris Bucas talk more about those.
So we've been working to help secure new market tax credits to help offset the cost of development of this project. We were fortunate enough to have more than one CD actually look at this project and want to invest in the project. We ended up, we're in final negotiations on a term sheet with Central Bank of Kansas City, which has committed $7 million of new market tax credits. That $7 million of tax credits nets to about $1.55 million in gross new market tax credit equity after closing fees, attorney's fees, and the CDE fees, which are, the CDEs is Central Bank of Kansas City. They're the group that has the allocation of tax credits. That's what it's called. The annual fee with the new market tax credit over the 7-year compliance period will be $59,500. And then we're estimating your net benefit at the end of the day to be $960,000. And when I say that, I mean that's every fee paid, the 7 years of compliance, everything to when you close the transaction in 7 years. So that will be what the UG nets. New market tax credits, I don't know how familiar you are with them, but it's essentially a soft loan to the unified government, which gets purchased at the end of the 7-year period for $1,000, and the UG is able to buy that loan to themselves for $1,000 and just extinguish it. So essentially it's written off, the nonprofit writes it off. And that's how all the nonprofit transactions occur. And it's a great benefit to these types of projects that serve communities.
So the grocers revenue sharing piece, this is an estimate that they expect. It's kind of broken up between years 1 and 3 and then years 4 through 15. So years 1 and 3 is the discussion of what is included in the management agreement with the MERC that was approved back in, I'm thinking October. In there it says that there is a revenue sharing back to the unified government, 3.5% of revenues above the quarterly benchmarks, which are detailed in the exhibit of the agreement. So, and then after that, assuming that we continue with the MERC, then the assumption here with these figures above is that we would convert it from a management agreement to a lease structure. And so based on a lease structure, given certain percentage per square foot and, you know, an annual inflator, what we're estimating is that on a constant dollar basis over the 15-year period, we'll generate $1.9 million in grocers revenue sharing back to the UG. And on a net present value basis, that totals $1.5 million. So these are the amounts that we're expecting will offset or pay back the UG for the $2 million that we're contributing in cash up front. Okay? Okay, go ahead.
And Commissioner Murgy, I did find, just pulled up, these are amazing, pulled up the management agreement. It's in section 5.2 called Grand Opening Fund. And it states that it's basically a fund to pay for things 60 days prior to the opening. So that includes a program for employing and training grocery store personnel, advertising, promoting, and marketing the grocery store, and initiating and carrying out all such other and further activities reasonably deemed necessary, such as initial inventory and other startup costs.
So it does say training employees.
It does.
What is the MERC doing? Why are we involved in the MERC's HR? Why are we training employees?
I think it's more of a startup, before they actually get money coming in.
I've never in my life heard of anybody training another business's employees anywhere. Not in business, not in government, anywhere. Why are we training another business's employees? I don't understand.
Well, I think it's actually to provide the working capital up front so that they have the funds so that they train the employees, not.
So we're paying the MERC to train their own employees.
Well, these would all be new employees from the community.
Well,
but yes.
That's fine. It's ridiculous.
Commissioner Townsend.
Well, just had a question to follow up on that. Whose employees are they really? They're working at the MERC?
Oh, they're MERC employees.
Okay.
Yeah. We will not be employing anyone.
Okay.
All right, so any other questions?
All the numbers, the projected revenue, all that came from MERC, right?
No.
Well,
The sales revenue.
Just the
Yeah, it was
sales tax
a
revenue.
third-party market study that we had done.
That's Merck's projections.
Well, no, yeah, it is a third-party
Oh,
consultant.
it's third party.
Yeah,
We had market study.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Will there be any requirements for hiring from within the county?
It should be 100%.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? Any comments from the audience? Anybody wish to address this here this evening? Let it be shown nobody stepped forward. We do need,
I think there's a few more slides.
okay.
Well, so I mean, we're now, ready for the actual action. So just a reminder, project area 1, there we go. So that's all we're talking about in terms of the TIF area and project area that we're approving tonight, and just a reminder of kind of what we've done to get here in terms of the TIF formation. And now we are ready. So.
Okay. Commissioner McKiernan, question, comment?
I'm just curious, are we supposed to, we've got 2 items, item 4 and 5 on our agenda. Are we supposed to take action on 4 at this time?
Yes.
Yes.
Or wait until we've gone through everything? So we're now at requested action for tonight, number 1, ordinance, redevelopment district plan.
Correct.
So I think there has been a little bit of confusion, Catherine, with everything that's been presented in this presentation. Is there any overlap between the 2 in this presentation? Between 4 and 5 on the agenda this evening?
So, I mean, it all has to do with financing, which is why we kind of gave the long presentation about the financing. But at this point, for item number 4, the resolution the ordinance, that is specifically to approve the project plan for the TIF area, which has to do with the...
So if you're asking for action on this, I would move that we approve the ordinance for the redevelopment district plan for project area 1.
Second.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. At this time, we'll have the roll call.
Roll call. Bryant.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend. McKiernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. Okay, that takes care of item number 4. Next on our agenda, the last item on the agenda this evening is the Kansas not-profit organization that needs to be established for the new market tax funds.
Yes.
Remember, tax credits, if I remember correctly.
So I'm going to let Chris explain a little bit more about why this.
Yeah, without getting into the weeds on the tax credit, all the tax credit intricacies, every new market tax credit project similar to this has 2 entities that are created. One that essentially becomes, kind of takes your aggregate capital that you have and invests it through the new markets structure to be able to leverage those tax credits. And the second being the owner of the project, which in this case is another nonprofit that you guys own and control. Both of those entities are 100% controlled by the unified government, have decision-making authority, are only enacted specifically for this project, and that's it. And in the end of the 7-year period, they essentially get dissolved. And I'm happy if you want to talk one-on-one or now about that structure, but it's just part of the new market tax credit structure on these projects.
Questions?
I have a question, knowing nothing about this. So who manages these not-for-profits?
It's a board that's, I don't remember, they were talking about who was going to be the member of the board, but it's city folks.
Yeah, so it effectively is a pass-through kind of thing. So county administrator, the CFO, Director of Economic Development, Director of Public Works, and the Executive Director of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council will be one, and then it will be those same 4
UG employees plus the director of the downtown shareholders for the other one. So there are two different boards.
So are all the outside parties volunteering their time for this?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bryant?
I'm sorry, my comment isn't necessarily about this, but it's about the previous thing we were talking about. So looking at the repayment, roughly the $2 million, you know, where the UG is outlaying the $2 million now at the value of $2 million today, with a repayment of roughly $2 million 15 years from now over that period, which will not have the same value that it has today.
But I applied the net present value, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, but it's still, you know, it will not buy, you know, and then you're also outlaying $150,000. In my opinion, that it almost looks like a startup fund that hopefully, when it comes time to do the ownership agreement with them and they move on into the lease area, that something can be done to recomp, you know, that money, you know, is more as this is not necessarily a gift. This is a loan to help you get started, but expected to be repaid in time.
Yeah, so the grocer's revenue assumption assumes, you know, that revenue sharing, that after, from year 4 on, that it would be a lease structure, but if, but the MERC could also decide to buy the building from us, and then we'd get the money all up front.
Yeah, I just, you know, if, as the revenue share, if the revenue picks up at a quicker pace than the expectation, that's great, because the revenue sharing would bring in more dollars back. But if it caps out, you know, where it's expected before it switches over to a lease, then you have a set number of dollars, and that's all you're going to bring in from the MERC. So mine is that making sure that when the agreement is done, you know, at the end, that those outlaid dollars are recomped, you know, as recouped, sorry, as much as possible from so they understand it was not a gift. This is a business proposition.
Any other questions or comments? I would draw your attention to the information in your book in reference to the articles of incorporation and the articles, and the board of directors, the additional members. It clearly explains what the responsibilities of the board members are. I know that was a question that I raised when I initially saw this information. I would encourage you to read over that if you have any questions. The fiduciary responsibility fall back on the LLC, and once we give them the authority to do what they need to do, it will fall in their lap and it'll be out of our hands. The
We have to act on
does have to approve the LLC.
Do we have to act on that to move it?
Yes, we do have to take action on this item this evening.
Move to approve.
Second that.
Did you second? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second. Motion been made and seconded to approve item 5. Before I do that, I need to ask if there's anyone from audience that would care to. Please note, no one's come forward, so we do have a motion. Time for questions.
Yes. I don't have a question. I just want to make a statement publicly. I am totally in favor of a grocery store in the northeast of our community, but I can't continue to vote yes and not say this. This is the worst deal I've ever seen in my life, and it's going to put a 20-year financial huge burden on the unified government. And these 2 non-for-profits are going to take a lot of time. We already can't get projects done that are sitting on the back burner. And now we're asking staff to do more by setting up these 2 not-for-profits. This is the project that will never stop taking from us. I think there's a better way to do it. Obviously, we did it twice in Argentina. Not the same deal at all, and the same demographic, the same economic base. It's ridiculous. So I'll continue to vote for it because I support a grocery store in the Northeast. This is a terrible financial deal for us and for our taxpayers.
Commissioner Townsend?
Just to clarify, I'm glad Commissioner is going to support Northeast, because that's yet to come. So just so we know, this is downtown. That will serve a lot of citizens from everywhere and out of the country and out of the county, city.
Well, I do know there's been a tremendous amount of input in reference to the need for the grocery store downtown. There's been tremendous community support and partner support. I know there's been many questions raised along this, but I truly believe this project will be a sense of goodwill for the community. The $2 million that has come from the previous project downtown is being reinvested in another project downtown, and it's scheduled for a repayment back so that we'll have additional dollars moving forward. Is it the perfect project? Time will tell. But with that, I sincerely appreciate the committee's indulgence. Catherine, thank you and for your presentation this evening. We have a motion and a second, so if staff will call roll, please.
Roll call. Bryant.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. That concludes our business for this evening. Thank you for your patience, and staff, thank you for all your preparations for this evening.